I'm sharing the agenda with you today. So welcome. I hope that everyone is enjoying the winter season and that your family is having a healthy and safe time as we move all the way through coming up to the first trimester of the year. It's going fast and furious at this very busy time of the year. For meetings such as this, welcome anybody who is new. We go through some agenda items and I share information. And then following that information share, I do keep the chat open. So if you have a question, you can put it in the chat, or you can take yourself off mute and simply ask out your question, or you can send it to me privately. So I wanted to begin today by starting with an update on the COVID activity levels and our student and faculty health. I wanted to provide first for you just some numbers about November. November is an incredibly tricky month because it's when we start closing the windows, more people are spending time indoors, and everything from the common cold to COVID tend to spread more in November. So last year in the district, when I was reviewing the numbers, November was definitely a time of higher activity level. So I thought you'd like to know a little bit about what our activity level is, how it is affecting students' learning, what students are receiving, for example, quarantine and remote instruction. So in terms of quarantined students because of close contact, in the last month, we've had to quarantine 14 students at Central because they were a close contact of a confirmed COVID individual. 15 students at Millington because they were a close contact of an individual who tested positive for COVID, and 4 students at Gillette. In terms of the positive COVID cases, there were 4 positive COVID cases at Central in the last month, 3 at Millington, and 1 at Gillette. Also have cases where we have individuals who are suspected to have COVID, which means that they have 2 COVID compatible symptoms. So perhaps they have a fever and a very strong cough. We had 21 suspected cases at Central, 27 suspected cases at Millington, and 21 suspected cases at Gillette. So what does a suspected case mean? It means that we ask that the individual receive a COVID test, and if they produce a negative COVID PCR test and they're not symptomatic, they can return to school. We do our very best not to exclude individuals who have seasonal allergies or who might have an underlying health condition that is not contagious. And if they're well enough to be in school, we do welcome them. We do ask that you help us by assisting in keeping anybody who has symptoms home or away from school, because that helps us minimize these numbers. And I know that it's hard because especially with younger children, their health can sort of change on a dime. They seem fine in the morning, and then when they're here by 10 a.m., maybe their fever spikes. So we understand that these are all judgment calls, but if you do see these symptoms in your children, if you can keep them home, it will help us keep down the numbers. We have a number of additional reporting requirements and COVID work that kind of takes place behind the scenes. So I wanted to take a few minutes today to discuss those with you so you can understand what the district is required to do and what we're learning from the data we're collecting. So we are required weekly at each school to complete a communicable disease report on the CDR-SS system. And that requires us not only to track the flu and COVID, but also to report if we have seen spread, what symptoms we're seeing. And the Department of Health looks at all of that information from the schools collectively and uses it to inform decisions about public health. Right now, we are calling Central Middle School an outbreak status. In other words, the Center for Disease Control has determined that Central Middle School should be treated as a location where there has been an outbreak of COVID. what causes a district, school, or the entire district to be identified as an outbreak status is when there are 3 cases that are connected to each other. In other words, we can confirm that 3 individuals tested positive for COVID only because they saw each other in school, they were exposed to each other in school. We know that they did not get COVID from another location. Well, to the best of our ability, we know that. We can see that it was likely that that transmission happened in school. When that occurs, the nursing office at Central has to complete a very involved spreadsheet documenting the health of everyone in the building, any new cases, and that form must be completed daily for 28 days. What happened in Central was we had those 3 cases that were connected. We began the monitoring status for the monitoring spreadsheet for outbreak status. And then we had another case. And what that does is it restarts the clock for another 28 days. So we're incredibly involved in tracking everything. We have to provide information to the Department of Health, the Department of Education, and all of that information is used for the state government to make determinations about how we should treat infected individuals. So I share this with you so that you can also understand when your child is sick and they're close to school, we do go through a number of things. 1, determining whether it's a COVID-related illness or not. And then 2, when we find a COVID-related illness, we do move on to dig into that with what's called the Center for Disease Control's decision tree. And we ask a series of questions of individuals who were in a classroom or in an area where people were exposed to COVID to determine how many close contacts there were and what constitutes a close contact. So that might be students who are sitting together at lunch, individuals who weren't consistently wearing their mask during the school day. And if we have those cases, we do have close contacts that have to quarantine for a period of time. So there's a little bit of clarification that I'd like to make about quarantine procedures. And the first is that we are doing so much better than we are last year that we have actually a different status now because of what's happening in Central. So when a school is determined to be in outbreak status, which Central is, quarantining must be 14 days. Even if there is a negative test, an individual cannot test out of the 14-day quarantine when they attend an outbreak status school. In our other schools, the CDC still recommends 14 days of quarantine, but they allow it to be 10. So we have moved the quarantining period down to 10 days. So I think we're in much better shape. We're being much more deliberate about who we're quarantining. If you were to take the numbers of positive cases that we've had in the last month, which are 8 district-wide, and recognize that out of that number, it only resulted in 32 students having to go, or individual faculty members having to be quarantined, you can see we're being as deliberate as possible. Our first hope is always to keep everyone in school, but we want to do that as safely and effectively as we can. I know that was a lot of information about COVID. So I want to stop sharing my screen and just pause right here and see if anyone has any questions. You can put them in the chat, call them out, or use the raised hand feature, whatever you're comfortable with before we move on to the next topic on the agenda. I'm looking to see if we have any questions in the chat or if anybody wants to call out a question.
Hi, Dr. Mucci, hi.
Hi.
I had a quick question.
Yes.
Has there been any indication from the Department of Education around the sunsetting of the mask mandate? Have they talked about any sort of indicators that they're going to look at, whether it's cases or vaccination rate? I guess I'm wondering what the guidance is there.
It's a great question, and it was actually on my agenda list, so thanks for reminding me. We have no guidance on what's going to happen once this sunsets. So we do know that we have to do everything that I've just described. We have to provide as much information as possible. But quite honestly, in the past, if things work the way they have previously, we'll find out from newjersey.com or we'll find out on the news. There's very rarely been a pre sort of release of information to school officials. We find out the same time as everybody in the state. And just to clarify for everybody else on the call, I had listed sunset for Executive Order 251. So the sunset date is January the 11th. And what that means is if nothing happens between now and January 11th, masks would be optional in public schools. So we're interested to see what happens, but we have heard nothing. In addition, I just wanted to share that we have at 150 of 267 eligible students at Central Middle School are vaccinated, and 11 of 206 eligible students at Gillette have been fully vaccinated. And we're in the middle of counting up those numbers at Millington. So what's also different about this year is that we do have students who are vaccinated, which allows us greater flexibility with quarantining. Because if a fully vaccinated individual is exposed and they're not demonstrating any symptoms, then what's great about that is masks would be required indoors for 14 days, but they don't have to move to remote instruction. So that's been a tremendous help this year. So I feel like we're managing better, but November, as I mentioned, is a challenging month just because of everything that presents. And I just wanted to share a more full picture with you of where we are with the COVID facts in the district and in the area. Tomorrow will be a big day because every Thursday, the New Jersey COVID activity levels are released on Thursday afternoon. And what's released on Thursday will be the report of the week following Thanksgiving. And some of the COVID cases and activity that we've seen have been a part or related to Thanksgiving travel. So it'll be interesting to see if we remain in a more moderate zone or if the levels in the area increases. Any other COVID related questions? Okay, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is a much more happy item. We are planning some facilities improvements that we've been working on. So we are set to have new lighting installed in the Millington Gym, all-purpose room, and the Central Gym next Tuesday, the 14th. We're hopeful that that is the date. Please give us a grace period around those days, but all three of those locations are pretty dark. And especially during the basketball season, we wanted to make sure that we got better lighting in there so that it was safer for our student athletes and more welcoming for the community when they come in to enjoy those games and events. The additional playground equipment that everybody voted on back in the summer, we are supposed to be, the latest update is shipped to our provider and installation is anticipated within the next month. You might notice new signage throughout the district. We've also ordered a new marquee for Central. The letterboard that we have there is not the most attractive. It definitely could use a cosmetic upgrade, but above and beyond that, the letters that we're using for the board have even lost their stick and it's just not functional in the way that it should be. Of course, as we experience these supply chain issues like all of you do with all of the things that you're trying to get done, we can't anticipate that we will actually have the marquee replaced until the springtime. So it's our hope and our goal that we will have that front of Central School just looking really nice for graduation for our 8th graders. Mr. Vitarello told me that he met recently with the 8th grade parents and they have some wonderful activities planned for the 8th graders this spring. We also will be sending out some notifications that the talent show, Long Hill's Got Talent, which is a great tradition in the area, will be coming back, and the date is April 28th. So we're really pushing towards some wonderful activities in the springtime, some new traditions, but also welcoming individuals into our school for things like the holiday shop at Gillette or parent conferences and meetings in person. You'll notice when you come to visit the school for school business that we are still asking. We went from no visitors to yes, you can come in for school business when you schedule something, to having our PTO food days volunteers in. And we do a COVID screening when people come in. So a temperature check and a brief checklist just to make sure that everybody that's coming into the building is healthy and safe to be around our students and faculty. The small playground at Gillette is receiving some asphalt repairs just to make that a safer surface for the students to play on. And you may have noticed that we are light years ahead in terms of temperature control of where we were just a year ago with the continued improvements that we have been doing with our HVAC systems. I'm going to pause after the second item on the agenda and ask if anybody has any questions about facilities improvements. This is also a time for you to let me know if you notice something in terms of our building and physical plan that you think needs attention. So for example, someone called the other week and noticed that the signage regarding dogs on school property wasn't really visible. And that individual noticed that, you know, when people don't see the signs, maybe they're letting their dogs free on school property, and that can be hazardous to the students and residents in the area. They brought that to our attention. As much as we're out and about around the schools, we do really appreciate your feedback on our facilities. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns regarding facilities, please share those with us now so that we can get them on our priority list for repairs. Okay, the next item on our agenda is some student health, faculty, and family health and wellness initiatives. We know, just like the beginning of this meeting, that we're tired of talking about COVID, we're tired of managing COVID, and it does take a toll on our mental health and wellness, both as a faculty and as our students. So I wanted to share with you some of the things that we're doing in district to address that. So the first is that we conducted a needs assessment of our faculty and staff's mental health and wellness. And I thought it might be interesting for you to hear some of the things that maybe you can relate to in your own personal and professional life that our faculty have said. So one of the overwhelming things that came out in the needs assessment, and just to clarify, we had an outside individual who didn't take any names or positions, but just really had an open conversation with different focus groups of faculty and staff and administrators to kind of get a handle on what type of programming we can offer to best support our students and our faculty. The faculty are feeling that sometimes work is incredibly exhausting in these times, you know, teaching all day, wearing a mask, working with students during the winter months when they're not feeling well, worrying about whether you're going to have to put your class on remote instruction, the unknown of some of the factors related to this, hearing things like COVID outbreak level at Central Middle School. And then saying that when I get home, Sometimes I don't have the energy for my own family in the way that I would like, and that can be, maybe make us have feelings of guilt or exhaustion. So we began to talk about and address some of these things. What we're also noticing, and I want to preface this by saying the teachers, the administrators, and I all feel the same way. The children in Long Hill, the students are second to none. They're respectful, they're engaged, they're so happy to be in school, and they're a sincere pleasure to work with. But they have been out of school or having very unusual school experiences over the last year and a half, 2 years. And that translates into a lot of additional time being spent on teaching students how to take turns, teaching students how to remain present with learning, teaching students how to monitor themselves, their things that they might call out. We act one way in home, and then some of the rules about becoming a student and working with a group might not be as fresh in the mind of some of our students. So that causes additional work and stress for the teachers. Our teachers have such a high level of expectations, both for themselves and for their students. So what can we do to make sure that everybody feels healthy, engaged, and supported? We're having a health and wellness fair for the faculty. We are working to have some additional substitute teachers to ease the stress of when someone's out and you have to run and cover another class when you thought you might get some time to yourself. But as you might be aware, just like there's a bus driver shortage, there is a severe substitute teacher and qualified teacher shortage. This is probably the worst teacher shortage we have seen in the history of the United States. I do not think I'm overstating it. The legislator in New Jersey is talking about that and has a number of bills to look at the way we have teacher preparation programs, because when we're monitoring the numbers every year for the last couple of years, it's been close, but in the last year, and it's anticipated this year, we have more individuals retiring from the fields of education than we do people entering the fields of education. I'm on a number of user boards. I'm on the Governmental Relations Committee for New Jersey. So I have a lot of anecdotal information that people share. And you often hear things like, we haven't been able to get a Spanish teacher. This is not Long Hill. I'm happy to say right now we have all of our positions filled. We could certainly benefit from more substitute teachers and bus drivers, but we have no academic areas that are uncovered. But we do feel it the same way that other districts do. So when a district says we haven't had a certified Spanish teacher for a year and a half, we had to deliver an online program, or they say that they have to collapse sections, or larger districts, like for example, Freehold Regional has 70 maternity leaves in 1 year and in this current school year, and only 34 of them are filled. In neighboring districts, I've heard superintendents say that elementary education, which is where there used to be a deep, deep pool of teachers, you would expect that you could anticipate hundreds, literally 200 applications for one spot. We're seeing single-digit numbers for applications. While we here in Long Hill are thrilled that we have all of our positions filled, there is a difference in that we are looking more at younger candidates because we don't have a lot of mid-year career change candidates any longer. So if you look, for example, at our guidance department, we have 2 guidance counselors, one that's between Gillette and Millington and one that is in Central. And last year, our guidance counselor left for a district to be 2 main reasons: closer to home and a higher rate of pay. And we have a newer guidance counselor who is doing a wonderful job and growing and learning in the profession. Couple that with at Central Middle School, our seasoned guidance counselor is out on maternity leave right now, which is wonderful for her family. But again, the substitute is someone who's doing a fantastic job, but they're newer. So we have decided that in those areas that are critical, which are really all educational areas, but specifically mental health and wellness, that when we have newer faculty members, we need to offer even more support than we typically would. So we are doing two things to support our counseling department during this time where increased mental health services are needed. So the first thing we're doing is, if you know, we have a central child study team, and the child study team offices are in Millington School. So our learning consultant, our social worker, our school psychologist are all stationed in Millington, which is wonderful. But what about students in other schools that need assistance? So starting this week, we are having the individuals from the child study team be stationed at Central Middle School so that there's an additional mental health support and professional there each day. We're also using our American Rescue Plan or our COVID relief money to purchase additional mental health services. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is we have a lot of times we talk about mental health and you wonder, what are the cases? What kind of behavior are you seeing, and how do you purchase something that will help that? There are a number of companies that actually allow or design specifically for school and allow districts to enter contracts with them to send fully certified and licensed clinical social workers or school psychologists to the school to develop a caseload, and they can do all kinds of things. So the behavior that we're seeing in Long Hill, again, compared to neighboring districts and other places, is not as severe or difficult as we've seen in other places, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be addressed and shouldn't be given careful attention. I will say part of the reason that I feel like we are in better stead than many in Long Hill is because our teachers are dedicated. They know their students, they know their families, but we do see that we need some help just with students on the playground, negotiating peer conflict, understanding how to engage with one another. We need assistance for some families who are having difficulty getting their children to school after a quarantine or after a long break or a vacation, and school refusal cases are present. In a lot of ways, it's sometimes better to have that outside professional who isn't an employee in the district help those families with some additional strategies on how to get your child ready for school in the morning, to prepare them for learning, to reduce their anxiety about coming back to school. It's hard. It's also hard if your child's home and they have the flu for a couple of days. We all feel that way. You know, it's a happy time of the year. You know, there's a lot of exciting things to look forward to, but maybe your child's been in bed for a few days and they've been enjoying their time at home, sort of decompressing and watching television. Well, how do you get them, you know, back in the role? I know as a parent, my youngest was sick and we did a number of COVID tests over the last couple of days. And when he was ready to return to school, even though he's a sophomore in high school and school shouldn't be anything new, we had to have a lot of conversations about, okay, are you prepared? What's your schedule like tomorrow? Just building up that stamina. So that is what these individuals will do for us. They're also going to provide kind of what we call a parent university. So this is where I would need your help and assistance. First, if you want to share either in conversation in this meeting, privately through the chat, or through email to myself or any of the mental health professionals in district, what have you heard, maybe in conversations with friends at a ball game, that we could really do better to support the students being successful in school with their mental and physical health? And then what kind of services are you looking for in terms of parent education, being a parent in the post-COVID world? What would help you most in managing your home and providing the best guidance for your children so that they can be successful? I'm going to leave a minute or two here to see if anybody has any comments or questions. And I'll also encourage you to follow up at the school level or with me privately if that's more comfortable for you. So being healthy and engaged isn't just our mental health. It begins with being well nourished. Here in Long Hill, we have just under 50 individuals who are eligible for free and reduced lunch. Free and reduced lunch is determined by federal guidelines. So there's a form that parents and families fill out, and it indicates their income level. If their income level is at poverty line below in that area, students are eligible for a free hot lunch and breakfast if the district provides every day. If the family income level is such that it would be a challenge, they might be eligible for a reduced lunch, which is usually a lunch that would cost about 50% less. Over the years, Long Hill has provided free and reduced milk for our students who are eligible for it. But because we don't have cafeterias, we have never provided lunch for those students. What we would like to do beginning in January is purchase lunches from Warren, from the high school, and have those 50 or so lunches delivered to each of the schools so that these children who are eligible could have lunch 5 days a week brought in for them. Right now, their parents are providing lunch, but this is one way that we can assist families, and the money that would be used for that is federal funding. So it's not something that increases anybody's taxes or adds money to the budget in a demonstrative way. And there's two ways that we can handle it. So the high school is happy to provide us with the purchase of those healthy balanced meals for the students every day, but we need to be able to get them to the schools. Warren District did this previously, and they established a cadre of volunteers. So someone would do the first and third Monday, and someone would do the second and fourth Monday, and issues such as that. And we can employ a courier, but the timing is challenging. So the individual courier to get the lunches from the high school to all of the 3 schools, we need to start by being at the high school at 10:45 and then do the loop to each of the 3 schools, beginning with Millington, then Gillette, and then Central. So if you are interested in volunteering, you could send me some information if you have that availability for an hour and a half, and what day of the week would be best. And we'll try and set up a schedule with volunteers and staff members. If we can't set up a schedule that would be fully staffed by volunteers, we will try and fill it in with a paid position. So I throw that out as a volunteer opportunity. There is a question, which is something I probably should have gone through when I was discussing what kind of behaviors we are seeing. The question is there any update on school buses, or will some of the new programming address interactions of students on the bus? There have been some incidents of inappropriate behavior that we know have been addressed, but that can also be an area where students need coaching in terms of appropriate behavior. That's a great comment and question, and really illustrates the example that I was trying to provide. So I thank you for that, which is, if you're a principal or you're a guidance counselor and you have to spend 45, it's really more like 2 hours, 45 minutes to 2 hours of your day, sort of tracking down, okay, what happened on this particular bus? Who said what? How were they affected? And go through all those interviews. It can be a time-consuming process. So what I was trying to get at with the additional staff is if we have extra people here to help us go through those disciplinary cases and work with students on making better choices, then the school district itself will be better run because you'll have more manpower and you can still address those issues. So I'm happy that in your comment, you stated that you felt as though those issues had been addressed. I feel like they were ferreted out and addressed very clearly, and that we saw some changes in the behavior. But yes, it's a lot of conversation and coaching for students, and dealing with things in the moment, and discussing, you know, why they're making particular choices or they're using certain language. And it's an ongoing process. We are having a number of not just individual conversations, but also school-wide assemblies. We're starting kind of an upstander club, and the purpose of the upstander club is to really empower those individual students who, when children are maybe out of the most watchful eye in a corridor on a school bus, can feel comfortable sharing when they see something inappropriate. And we want to give the language to students to be able to communicate to a trusted adult when they witness something that doesn't align with our values. But we also want to make sure that they feel safe reporting that. So it's an ongoing question and something we continue to work out. Give me just 1 second. I'm concerned about, yes, this is a great question about the stigma around free and reduced lunch. It was apparent that, yeah, I agree with you. What are we doing? Is this something that we should survey families who fall in this category about their preference, so long as other accommodations in line with policy? Yes. So there is an intention, and I do know the stigma that some people may feel. So, for example, my husband was a free and reduced lunch student as well. You know, his father tragically died. His mother was left with 4 children under 6 and had to figure things out. And it was rough for a while. And I remember him telling me, and he's now, you know, over 50 years old, and he can say it as vividly as when he was in the 3rd grade, that his name would, you know, his regular teacher, when she was there, knew to, you know, discreetly give him a token that he could give in the lunch line, and he was able to do that to get his lunch. But if a sub came in, you know, they would call out the names, and it was really a process that made him feel embarrassed, such that he wouldn't go for lunch on those days. Fortunately, we have grown since those times. We think very carefully and deliberately. Parents will elect to be a part of this program. They will make the choices. We will review with them the discrete way that lunches will be distributed. And it's the intention is really not to stigmatize, but to make this a seamless process that doesn't identify one group over another and single them out. So we've given a lot of thought to that. Any other comments on mental health and wellness, physical health and well-being? Okay, the next item is our curricular updates, and we have several. Happy to report that Friday is the deadline if you're interested in volunteering to be a part of our youth entrepreneurship program, which we received a grant to get training for everyone who is interested in bringing this program to grades 3 through 8. It's all about creative thinking, helping students figure out what to happen when the things don't go their way, or something they've designed or built doesn't meet the expectations that they thought. And it's about being an optimistic thinker. So students who are engaged in this program will have the opportunity to create and design products that meet an unmet need in a community. They can be a part of the steam tank challenge, where they meet with engineers and learn how to build their own steam tank. And everything is a productive struggle learning process. And all of this sounds so wonderful. Don't we want all of those qualities in our students? We'd love to have a strong reserve for them in ourselves. So to truly understand how to make an engaging program like this requires a lot of training, instruction, understanding how to use the materials that have been tried and tested with all different groups around the country and around the world engaging in this process. So if you're interested in volunteering, our grant funds the full 2-day training in February for anyone who is interested. And right now, I'm proud to report that we have 15 individuals, mix of faculty, administrators, and parents who are going to this training together in February. And then when we come back from the training in February, we're going to begin the program, turnkey the training to individuals who might not have been able to attend and get some of these groups up and running. It's part of our Learning Acceleration Initiative, which is an effort we have to recognize that after being home for so long during COVID, many of our students need more opportunities to engage, push themselves further, and to really challenge. So we have a number of after-school programs that we're beginning. We've also, you'll see some mailings about Model United Nations, debate, workshop of the arts, a special challenge on engineering challenge on how to build a snowman. These are all things that we are bringing in that are new, that will supplement instruction that's going on in the classroom and keep our students engaged in learning outside the school day. Our Summer Institute last year served 125 students, and it was received some excellent feedback. We are planning to include that again. So that'll be targeted to students who are operating at grade level. They're going to progress to the next grade. They'll be ready for that work, but they might need some additional supports to strengthen their ability to just dive right in come fall of 2022. We have 9 professional learning communities that teachers are engaged in. They're meeting after school. They're developing lesson plans on making an inclusive environment. We also are addressing some of the things that were mentioned in the chat about how do you deal with behavior that maybe you haven't seen before. To speak frankly and honestly with you, one of our concerns that we saw, and I share it, as well as the administration and the teachers at Central, is the vast amount of exposure that our middle school students have had in unsupervised platforms to social media, yes, but also inappropriate material on the internet has really translated to behavior for some of our middle school students that's just not acceptable. So that can be everything from language to provocative statements to changing kind of the norm of what a classroom conversation would be like, you know, maybe saying things for shock value. And again, while not pervasive, we are seeing a number of our students struggle with these type of behavior issues at the middle school. Something we hope to focus on. We've already had a number of programs to address this. We've had the Long Hill Police coming in and discussing cyberbullying and being a good digital citizen. What does that look like? You know, sometimes we think as adults, gosh, how many times do we have to read this, right? We see adults in great professions blowing themselves up because they use social media inappropriately or they conducted themselves inappropriately at their job. And we think, haven't people learned this lesson by now? But what we have to realize is these students are 12, 13, 14 years old for the first time. They're not looking at things the way we are. So how many different ways can we convey the message to them about what your digital footprint looks like and how this can be helpful in combating problems that exist in the social media and in that arena? So I would say that one of the things we've noticed is, you know, maybe sexually precocious comments and behavior at the middle school. And that's something that really needs to be addressed deliberately, head on, and with parental support. That's some of the things we are working to do with the professional learning communities. And obviously, when you get those things under control, you can also increase student achievement because you have more productive time on task in the classroom. If you really are interested in our curriculum, specific updates, talking about what these projects look like, after the new year on January 12th, we'll have our second strategic plan update where we'll share with you more detailed dimensions of what we're doing with each of the objectives for the long range plan for the district and what they look like and how they connect to your students and their experiences. I'm going to pause again. Those were the updates that I had to offer. Just want to see what other questions people may have. And it certainly doesn't have to be on anything on the agenda. It can be on any topic you're interested in at all.